Hey guys, welcome back to Pawnshop Special number 2. This is the Xmaxx edition, and we got this one at the pawn shop for $3.50. Now, full disclaimer, we know the guy that owned it, and he hawked it because he needed the money to start his business. Very cool. He was going to lose it to the pawn shop, offered it to us, and we grabbed it. Now, the thing is, in the first video, which is part 1, and that'll be right up here for the link on that, that one we went through the suspension, we went through the radio gear, and we went through the motor and whatnot, and it did have a burned out motor, and it did have the, what are these ones? Yeah, had the Badlands on it. And these things way up. In the first video, we went over all of that for you. So you know what putting the different tires and wheels on, it can be a problem. If you're curious about that, check out RC Tires 101 in the 101 playlist, and we go over it in detail and show you what to look for when you're buying tires. At the same time, in this video, we're going to go right into the, we're going to skip the suspension. We did that in the first one. We're going to go right into the differentials. The center one is still good to go. It feels normal. Everything's working well in there. So we're not going to break the car in half and go after that. We're going to go after the end one. So front and rear differentials. In this video, we're going to show you how to get them out. We're going to show you what they consist of, and then we're going to make sure everything's good to go and put them back in the car. That's just normal maintenance, basically. But when you buy a used RC, whether you get it from a pawn shop, a buddy, somebody that you met online, whatever, you never know what they did to their car, and it's always good to check. So in this video, we are going to break this down, and we're going to show you how it's all done. This should be pretty cool, guys, but it's a bench video. There isn't any action in it yet. We have to get it built first. Check this out. Okay, so let's get this front bumper out of the way. Now there are 2 screws on the top here, and we'll separate that just like that. And there are 2 more down below. We'll back these out real quick. Keep in mind, guys, if you're using a power screwdriver, don't go fast, nice and slow. There you go, bumper off. Now we need to get the skid plate out of the way. And this is the same on the front and the back as far as the skid plate and stuff goes. So there you go, 4 screws. Lift that out of the way, just like that. All right, now there's 5 screws on the bulkhead here. So there's 1 in the center at the bottom, and then there's 4 along the sides, 2 per side. There we go. And this can be a little stubborn, but it'll pop off. There you go. Just like that. And there's the differential. Here's the screws that we used, and 1 is a different size than the other 2. Remember where that one goes. Okay, with a little fidgeting, you can get this out. And that doesn't look too bad on the outside. At least it was well lubricated. Now let's take a look at the pinion and make sure none of the teeth are damaged. Roll it a couple of times and just inspect each tooth as it goes. This one actually looks pretty good. Let's do a quick cleanup on it. Get some of that goop out of the bottom. There we go. And there's a stub on the one side. And so this goes in with the diff gear to the left, that's this side, and it'll fit right in that way, but with it the wrong direction. And it would normally fit in there, but that stub, that'll stop it from going in. Just like that, it won't go. Turn it around and it fits right in. So that helps you keep from putting it in backwards. But if you don't have that stub, remember, the diff ring when you're facing the car is on the left. Let's go ahead and break this down now. We'll do a little cleanup on the outside. Get some of that goop off. Now I always recommend wearing gloves for this because it's messy. All right, let's take it apart. There's 4 screws here. We'll back them out. Nice. Let's see what's inside. That doesn't feel right. Oh, look at that. That's not the normal diff fluid that comes in these things. Let's get the gasket out of the way. This looks like it's going to need some deep cleaning, so we'll go ahead and move this out of the way. And be real careful with that gasket. It's just silicone. It's not all that strong. Everything seems to turn okay, but this is not okay. I got to find out what that is. Okay, and this doesn't really feel like your normal heavy diff fluid either. There's something goofy about it. There we go. Look at that. That's not normal. So that means we're just going to have to clean the entire diff out. So let's take it all the way down. Full disassembly. Get the spider gears out first. There we go. Look at all that down in there. See if we can work some of that up. Imagine that. Well, that's the risk you take when you get a used RC. You never know what they've put in stuff, so it's always good to inspect it. Well, at least it's still spinning good. So let's go ahead and take it apart, and this screwdriver does help it from spinning in your hand. It's got one screw right there, and then the drive axle hub will come right off in your hand. Okay, let's go ahead and get that bearing out. Oh, that's all that is the dust cover. We can put that back on. So we'll tuck it in real quick so we don't lose it. And when we clean it, we'll put it back. Now to get this gear out of here, we want to go ahead and push through with the screwdriver, and it'll loosen everything up and it'll pop right out. And be careful, it does have a seal on it. Let's get as much of this out of the way as we can. I don't want to track it all over the table, so we'll try and get as much off as possible. There we go. It's really dense. There we go. And let's get all the goop out of the teeth if we can. And let's take the other side apart as well. So get that screwdriver in there, it'll help you break it loose. There we go. And just back the screw out. Now this is into metal, so we will use Loctite when we put it back together. There we go, pull the drive hub out. And get the bearing off, and we're going to need to push that through as well. Now be careful not to mess with the threads. A nice wide screwdriver does a pretty good job of this. Nice. Now you see that if you look in there, the seal is still in there, so we want to make sure and get that seal out. And this is only silicone, so be real gentle with it. That actually looks pretty good overall. All right, get the seal off the other one. And right behind the seal, there's a couple of washers, one on each one of these, and they're not metal. So I knew something was wrong with the fluids as soon as I got it open. It was really stiff, and these aren't really stiff on the front and rear, so I knew something got adjusted in there. So I got a hold of my friend and I asked him what he had done to the differentials. And come to find out, he couldn't get a hold of silicone earplugs, so he jammed silly putty in there. And although it feels like it would work really well, silly putty is 17% crystalline quartz, which is a huge abrasive, and you don't want to put that in there. It'll wear things out really fast, so that's going to require a serious cleaning. Now, we went over it really good, and we used silicone spray to make sure and loosen everything up and get it out. So now they're clean. But keep in mind, guys, just because it feels like the right consistency doesn't mean it's the right stuff to use. It has to be lubricative, and it has to not wear on the parts. And silly putty absolutely will not last in the long run. It'll just gut your differentials and you'll have problems. So keep that in mind. Now that things are ready to go, let's get down on the bench and we'll show you how to put it back together. We've got our components here. There's the spur gear, the outer bearings, the drive cups. We've got our bell gasket here. We've got our outer gears here. We have our differential bell here. We have our PTFE washers, which are not metal. You got to be pretty careful with those. And then there's the silicone gaskets. and of course the spider gear assembly. Here's your part numbers. All right, so let's go ahead and get busy with the reassembly. Now that it's all been cleaned up, we'll have a good look at it, and we're going to put this washer on first. That gives us some protection against the gear, and then we're going to put the gasket in place. And this will be the same for both pieces. So both of these will have the same layout. Here we go. While we're at it, let's do them both. And be careful not to let these gaskets twist. There we go. Those are in good shape. Let's go ahead and take the bell here and we'll fish one through. Get it lined up. Make sure everything's clean, and we're going to want to put the bearing on first. So we'll get that on there. Slide that through. Everything looks good. Set her down for a second, and we'll get some Loctite on the screw here. There we go. Now be careful, only use the blue stuff on this. If you use the red stuff, it causes huge problems. It makes them really hard to get apart. So only use the blue Loctite on this kind of thing. Check the fit. Everything feels pretty good. Let's move on. We'll slip the piece in. There we go. Check the fit. No binding. Good. Let's get that bearing in place. And then we'll go right after the drive cup here. Everything's moving freely. So let's get that other screw. Get a little Loctite on it. And the reason we're using Loctite here, guys, is because it's metal to metal, so you definitely want to get some of this on there. You don't have to use Loctite when you're going into plastic, but when you're going into the metal stuff, you definitely want to get some on there. A lot of vibration in these, a lot. Now let's assemble the spider gear assembly. And if you take a look, there's a notch in both of these. Those will come to play here in a few minutes. We'll show you what that is. So let's get the gear on first, and they have to face towards the center. And we'll get our block on the outside, and the block holds everything in position once it's in the bell. So face the two gears together and get the block on the outside like that. Spread those out a little bit because they have to fit over that outer gear. Quick assembly on the other one. It goes together exactly the same way. And when you place these in there, watch how this goes in. You can drop it right in place and just spread everything to the sides. Make sure it fits down in those blocks. Have to fit down in these slots. So it can be a bit of a trick sometimes. And then see right there, keep the flat spot so it's facing up. And when you put this one in, you're going to want that flat spot facing down. Then they can interlock. That's what the important part to that is. They have to interlock. So when you drop it in, you get everything lined up. Make sure those push down together and lock in as one. And the reason for that is it keeps the gearing even, so they run at the same elevation. So push it down tight. And see how those are like one rod now? That's because of those two flat spots, and it runs nice and smooth. There we go. So we're going to use 80K in the front and the rear. So this is the brand we're using. And it doesn't really matter what brand you use. We just picked this one up because it was handy, but it's still the right consistency. So this is what we're aiming for. So you want to get a certain amount on the top, and then you need to run it down into the gears. Now do this real slow or you'll pop those spider gears up. So you got to turn it real easy. And what we're trying to do here is get the fluid into the bottom of the differential. We need to get that filled up. Run it both ways. The gears lifted a little bit, so I had to push them down. So they're down now. and that stuff is real sticky. So now we'll go ahead and top it off, and you don't want to fill it all the way up because you have to make room for the other gear that's going to go in this side. So you want to have a little less than full, and it's kind of an eye judgment type of thing. You have to look at it and make sure there's the room in there. You don't want it to be completely filled up. You need room for movement. So just leave it low a little bit, and then we're going to clean up the edge here so we don't have any spillage, no mess. There we go, just like that. See how it's not all the way to the top? So let's get the gasket in place, and it doesn't really matter which side you put it on, whether you put it on the bell or you put it on the spur gear, as long as the holes line up exactly, because there's little stubs that have to go through there on the spur gear side. That looks pretty good. Now make sure that you line these up directly. They have to go right in the right spot. Look through the holes and make sure everything lines right up. You'll feel it pop in when it actually gets there. But if you don't line this up right, you're not going to get it to click down, and you may have a bind in your gasket, so be real careful. There we go, and it clicked in just fine. Now we can screw it back together. Now we are screwing into plastic here, so we're not using Loctite. So we'll do the first 2 screws the old-fashioned way with a hand tool. There we go. And you always jump one side to the other. You don't go around in a circle when you install these. Make sure you go one side to the other, and it holds everything flat as it goes together, and you don't get any binding. I know that sounds kind of strange, but if you go around in a circle, it can fasten it down wrong, and you can have problems. So always jump across when you put these together. And don't tighten them down yet. Just get them in there so it's holding it snug down. Now we'll do things the easy way. And we are threading into plastic, so even though this is sped up, we're going in nice and slow so we don't overheat the plastic. The problem is when you run in a bolt like that, the threads can actually cause a lot of heat, and it can melt the plastic, and then you can't keep your bolts tight. So always real slow with these things. Melting the plastic is a bad thing, and eventually you'll wind up buying a new bell. Always tighten by hand. There we go. Get them down snug. Then cross over and tighten them down. There we go. And we'll go right around the rosy here and make sure everything's snug. There we go. Just like that. Sure looks good. All right, so that being done, it feels real smooth now. Everything feels the way it should. It's clean inside. The bearings are good. We did lose a dust cover, but we put it back on. No problems there. So this is ready to go back in the car. The front and the rear build the same way, so we're not going to show you the build on the other one. It'll be identical to this, and we are going to use 80K in both. And that's just a test that we're going to do. I'm trying to level out the drive on it, and we'll see how that works out. We may change it later, but this is a sample to see how it works. So let's go ahead and put this back in the car. So getting this to sit in there, you need to fish it in one side first, and then connect the other drive axle on the other side, and it'll snap right in. This might take a couple of tries for you to get locked in, but it does go. Now we'll get some lubrication on there, and we'll put the bulkhead back on. Make sure it snaps in, so you'll hear it. There we go. And of course, I like to do the center screw first. It holds everything in place while you get the outer screws in place. And then always torque by hand, guys, always. Nice. Let's get the skid plate back in place. Just like so. Run the screws in. Nice. And torque by hand. Good. Let's put that bumper back in place. So bottom first, and then line up your top areas. Get it in there. Make sure your bottom's sitting in the right place. And then let's get the screws in. Bottom first. There we go. And those are just snug. We'll get the top ones in. And then we'll torque them by hand. Beautiful. There we go. All right, that behind us. The front build went really well. Everything feels nice and smooth, and it was worth doing, I gotta tell you that. We're gonna go straight on to the back now. We're gonna show you how to get that out. We're gonna skip the build on this part because all you have to do is refer to what we did on the front diff. They're identical, so that's gonna be fine. We'll show you how to get it out, show you how easy that can be, and then we'll show you how to place it back in the car. The cool part is it's got that little stub on the one side, so you can't put them in backwards. At least this version has that. If you don't have that little stub in there, remember when you're facing the car, differing is on the left. So let's go ahead and tear it down. Okay, so this is pretty much the same as the other one with the exception of the wheelie bar. So we'll pull the 4 screws, just like that, and the wheelie bar lifts right off. And then the rest of this is pretty much identical to the other one. So we're not gonna talk, check it out. So as far as disassembly goes, the rear end is pretty much identical to the front end with the addition of the wheelie bar, and that's really not a big thing at all. The wheelie bar, it has the 2 at the top, and this just wedges in at the bottom, and that's the only difference between the front and the rear as far as taking it apart goes. So that makes everything very simple to work on for these things. So we'll put it back together right quick here and show you how easy that is. You saw the front, it's just the same in the back. It's going to be quick. And we'll get on with it right now. There you go, guys. There's the diff rebuild for the Xmaxx. Now, those differentials really were in bad shape as far as what they had in them. He hadn't run it long enough to really cause any lasting damage, but having grit in your differentials is never a good idea. If you're going to put silica in your differentials, you might as well throw the thing in the garbage, because after a short period of time, it would just destroy those differentials altogether. It was a real pain to get out, and that's just how it goes with these really thick fluids. Now, I'm glad we checked all this stuff. We're not completely done with this yet. The suspension checked out. We got the new motor. We still have to get that installed and all that good stuff, and then we'll do the tally. This is all going to be in the next video. This is all we have time for here. I hope it was instructive. I hope it was helpful. You know, if you haven't already, don't forget to bash that like button and help our content spread. If you guys have anything you want to add to this video, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below and help others along the way. Hey guys, I'm AJ with AJ Jam Studio saying, keep wrenching, guys.